Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and even to the little ones. Today we're going to be talking about talking with machines, exploring speech, text, and computing. AI is involved in this, but this isn't about AI. This is about text to speech and speech to text. But I will start with just a quick background. A lot of people seem to think that AI popped up last year. That's when it got the big promotion that made everybody aware of it. But all of this has been going on a long time. So here's an analog computer from 1930. It was all gears and pulleys and belts and drive shafts, but it computed numbers, mostly for the military. And then ENIAC was built during World War II. So it's the first electronic numerical integrator and computer, ENIAC. And this was built during the war and again, mostly used by the military. But now we have server farms. So when you go to Amazon Zoom right now is recording this to a server farm. And I thought it was interesting that the Telegraph Western Union building in Manhattan is now a server farm, where it used to have 1 million telegraphs each day shuttled in and out, carried by a network of cables, pneumatic tubes, and 30 employees on roller skates. So the same thing's going on. We're still communicating using text, but everything does change. So anybody that's written a computer program, this is the first thing you write, hello world. It's a tradition. That was supposedly one of the first messages ever sent. And so in computers, text isn't actually text. It's represented by numbers. So the ASCII numbers, you can see there, that string of numbers represents the text hello world. But on your computer, computers only register ones and zeros on and off. Our computers are just giant switching machines, and they just switch on and off, 0 and 1. So the same text, hello world, takes up that much space, that many switches to represent. And in the old days, when we had green screens with vacuum tubes, this is what it would look like. So I just wanted to do just a quick, we are working with computers, computing is involved. So I just wanted to give that quick background. I love this photograph. It's actually a knowledge graph, but it reminds me of the images we see of the internet, except it's simpler and more understandable. The ones of the internet are so large now that they just look like mush to me. But this is what's going on. We're all in our locations. We're all connected through the technology. We're streaming video, seeing images, using the Zoom platform on our computers. And so I just love this picture. It just sort of represents how we're all connected in multiple ways. And I always bring up complexity theory since talking about AI and large language models and machine learning and all the things that are going on. Because it really is what you need to know about to really understand complex systems and how they adapt and change and new pieces emerge. This is all the words, the language of complexity. So I just throw this up for people that want to come back to it, or I'm happy to share my slides. This is just one reference. But complexity theory basically tells us that things are so complex that we really can't understand them. We can break off a small piece and analyze that and understand that small piece. But everything as a whole, like the previous image of everything connected like that, you really can't understand the whole thing. It's just too complex. And one little change in one place changes the entire system. And so it's just important to keep these things in mind, especially when we're talking about um, large language models and machines. So I don't like the term artificial intelligence. It's very misleading. What we're actually working with are large language models, which are complex adaptive systems, which is another way to say complexity. And here's just a little image that I pulled from Wikipedia that shows that all of this has been going on for a long time. Um, it's emerged now because of all the corporate, I'll say, advertising um, that's put it into our consciousness, but it's been around a long, long time. The term artificial intelligence was coined in 1956. So again, this has been going on. Um, it was coined to differentiate the mathematicians from the people the systems, more engineering types working on systems, and they were called their field was called cybernetics. They were cyberneticists, I believe, and so John McCarthy coined the term artificial intelligence to differentiate what the mathematicians were doing in trying to model language and intelligence. I'm of the school with Kate Crawford that AI is neither artificial nor intelligent. So again, these are just statistical. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself. So Kate Crawford takes a critical view. She's more interested in the power structure of who owns these things, who's designed them, who owns them, how they're biased, and we should be aware of how we use them. Some people have called them stochastic parrots. So what we're talking about today is using speech to generate text or using text to generate speech. But to do that, you have to use a large language model or supposedly AI to make the conversion. And the way these large language models work is they're statistical generators. They're trained on a huge corpus of language, of words, of text, and then through algorithms, which are statistical predictors, they just predict the next logical word based on the data that they have. And they add a little bit of randomness, which is the stochastic part. And that's why they're called generative AI, because they're not quoting text to you. You're not searching for text. You're asking for a textual response, and the large language models generate text with just enough randomness in it that you can call it unique. And if you've ever used them, you can generate the same text over and over. I mean, you can use the same prompt over and over, and it will generate slightly different text. And so I love this idea of the stochastic parrot. So the machines do not understand what they're saying. The machines do not understand the context that they're in or that you're asking it to generate text within. They're just statistical predictors of words. And this is the hardest thing to get across because people are saying, well, the machines are, becoming conscious and they're going to take over the world and all these things that people talk about. And it's just not what's going on. It's just a bunch of ones and zeros. So I love this little example from IBM. It just, in a very simple way, shows how these things work. So on the left side, we're imagining an app, say on your phone, your surfing app, and it'll ask you 4 questions. Are the waves good? Is the lineup empty? Is the surf spot one of my favorites? And has there been a recent shark attack? And so you answer those 4 questions, and this shows how those inputs X1, X2, X3, X4, which are numbers, are put in, and then they're weighted by the large language model for the statistical processing, and it translates it into mathematics. It assigns these values. It calculates the output, The output is 9. 9 is greater than 0, so you can go surfing. So this is just how all these models work. So we're going to be using some of these in a minute, and I just want you to kind of understand how they work. Here's my favorite graphic. Now, this shows 2, 4, 6 layers. What we're going to be working with in a minute will have millions of layers of algorithms shuttling this, both mathematics and what they call tokens, so pieces of text, sometimes even a single letter. And they're shuttling it up and down through the layers and back and forth. And so when people talk about auditing or transparency or all these words that people throw around that we need to use, my position is that that's not possible. And I believe the computer scientists agree that so much is going on. And with the back propagation and forward, you put things in to a black box and something comes out and you can never track it because it's complex. That's why I mentioned complexity theory. It's too complex to break into little tiny pieces and say, oh, well, then this happened, then that happened, then this happened. It's not how these things work. So we've all heard that they hallucinate. I promote Harry Frankfurt's concept of bullshit. I know it's not polite to use that word, so we'll now switch to BS, but he titled his book on BS, and he explains that you can tell the truth or you can lie, which is you know something and then you say the opposite, deliberately lying. And then there's BS, which is you just say whatever it takes to get what you want. Here, as it says here in the text, as long as it serves your purpose. And this is what large language models do. They generate text. You ask it to generate text, and it generates text. It doesn't understand what it's saying, so it can't be telling the truth or lying. It's just generating text. And so it's just, the text is very believable. If you've seen some of these, what they call hallucinations, which is just a bad use of that term, they're well crafted, they're perfect sentences and paragraphs, and then you look at it and you go, well, that's just nonsense. And so these machines are very capable of generating that, and it's up to us to take a critical look at everything we do and decide if it's usable or true or whatever our criteria are. And so whenever you're playing or using these large language models, they're designed, often they're called chatbots. A chatbot is a large language model, which is artificial intelligence. It's another confusing thing that the corporations that own them do is they keep changing the words on us. So when you're playing with one of these things, imagine it to be in conversation with you. And you can give it context. You can say, as a graduate student in social science or a graduate student in marriage and family therapy, tell me, and then tell it what you want. And you can say in casual language or in professional language. So you can construct your prompts to get what you're looking for. And it's more than just, tell me a story. You need to guide the large language model to get the response that you want. They're not very good at generating long text. When I made this slide, it was 500 words. Now you can get maybe 1,000 words out of them. But if you try to go longer than that, again, it starts breaking down and doesn't make sense. You can challenge it. You can point out where it's inaccurate. That you're actually helping train the model, so you're working for the corporation at that point. But it does improve their responses. You can ask it to rewrite it. It'll come out slightly different. You can ask it, what would be a better way to ask this question to get this response? And it'll generate a long prompt for you. And then you can turn around and plug that in. And then, so you can actually have this conversation. In each instance of the chat bot, it's aware of everything in that chat. But once you close that chat, when you open a new chat, that's a brand new chat bot that doesn't know anything, except what it's been trained on, but doesn't know anything that you've talked about it with before. So each conversation is unique, but you can go on and you can refer to previous parts of the chat you're having and, continue or build upon that dialogue. And if you go long enough, it'll just start to break down. These things really aren't built for long conversations or book writing or anything that, is long. But in short bursts, they're fine. And the main thing to remember is just play around, see what they can do for you. They can generate some useful text, and they can, make some really silly stuff. So I just wanted that for background, because that underlies everything we're going to do today. Today, we're going to talk about speech to text, which is shortened to STT. And then we're going to talk about text to speech, TTS. And so on my phone, there's a little microphone. And if I want to speak to send a text, I click the microphone and I can say, I'll be there in 5 minutes, and hit send. Most people are familiar with this, whether you use it or not. I don't particularly use it much, but I don't text that much. But for people who text all the time, often they only text by speaking into their phones. On my phone, which is a Google phone, I also have a recorder. And I know Apple has a similar feature. I'm not sure about the rest of the phone world. I've had Google phones for a long time. But on my phone, there's a recorder app. And so I can record something, and then it will generate the transcript. So it will transcribe my speech to text. And then on the phone, I can directly copy that transcript. I can copy the text to a Google Doc, and it will just automatically, when I click copy transcript to Google Doc, it opens a new Google Doc and places the transcript there. So this is a particular Google feature. I understand most people don't have this, but just I wanted to show you that that's one way that you can create speech to text. So here's the recorder app on the desktop. And so you can see the audio scroll by on the left. You can see the transcription on the right. When you click inside the transcription, it takes you to that place in the audio. It doesn't automatically generate a Google Doc when you use the desktop, which is interesting, but the phone does.
What's the app called?
Recorder.
Okay. It's a Google app?
It's a Google app. Yeah.
Okay.
And as far as I know, it's only on Google phones. But I know Apple has a similar feature, but I really don't know about Samsung or, all the different phones out there. So again, you're looking for speech to text, STT. So you're looking for an STT app for your phone if you're trying to find something like that. So that's what I wanted to share with the simplest speech to text is using your voice to text people or using your voice to record notes. That's kind of the simplest. Now I'm going to show some other ways that I use speech to text. Margaret Kimberly is one of my favorite political commentators from Black Agenda Report. So this was a recent webinar, and I wanted to convert it to text. And so I happen to have an extension on my Firefox browser. So these things get complicated, but this is a free extension. And I downloaded the YouTube video. And YouTube makes it hard to download because they want you to upgrade to the paid feature. But there are other ways to do it. And you could simply record the thing, but then that would take as long as the recording. And this one's short, only 11 minutes. But, for an hour-long presentation to record for an hour, takes an hour. And so this app makes it easy to just download the video. So I downloaded the video, and then I put it into a video editor, and I just pulled out the audio. I know this is getting complicated, but you can do things like this. And so now I'm in Bing browser just because it works best with Microsoft. And so now I'm in Microsoft Office 365, and this is another way you can use speech to text. I'll show Google Docs in a minute too, but this is Microsoft because Microsoft has a feature that Google Docs doesn't have is you can dictate, so you can speech to text, STT, but you can actually transcribe audio. And so using the transcribe feature, you can upload audio. So I've uploaded the audio from that video and then it transcribes it for you. And so here's the transcript. And I can make this a little bigger. And so this is the transcript, the large language model transcription of the audio of Margaret Kimberly. But you can see that it's not punctuated correctly. Anybody that's transcribed, you understand you always have to copy edit a transcription. So, but this is just to show you the one feature that Microsoft Word has that Google Docs doesn't have is the ability to transcribe audio. Now, also, both document creators have the ability to just type with your voice. So I can dictate using my voice, and you can see that it automatically punctuates. This is another feature that Google Doc doesn't have. The Office 365 or Microsoft Word offers this automatic punctuation feature. And so I don't have to say period, new line, new paragraph, or things like that. But you can see that it jumped and started generating a new paragraph. So you have to play with these again to learn how they work. Each one works a little differently, but they're very convenient if you're a person who likes to speak instead of typing. So that's the Microsoft Word version. The AI that I use is called Claude. I don't use ChatGPT. It's a competing one. And so rather than copy editing that document, I dropped it in here and I asked the large language model to copy edit it. And so you can see that now it's in complete sentences without a bunch of mistakes, correct punctuation, paragraphs. And the machine did that with one click. I just pasted the transcript, asked it to copy edit it, and dropped it in here. And then now, everything changes all the time, as we all know. Now, this little click to show TTS button shows up. This is new. And I'm seeing it, I think it's in the browser because I'm seeing it everywhere. And so when you highlight text now, it's been in a couple different browsers, this little button pops up. And so now it's going to convert that text to speech. So this is what blind people have been doing for decades. And now all of a sudden it's just automatically everywhere. So if you were blind, well, I don't know, you wouldn't see the button, I guess, but I guess it would tell you there's a button. But maybe you wouldn't have to. I know that some of the screen readers can be expensive, so perhaps now screen readers will be more accessible.
Politicians and the media have much to say, none of it complimentary, about what they call the Chinese Communist Party, or what they call the CCP. But there's only a CPC, Communist Party of China.
That's one of my things I find so annoying when American politicians talk. They always say CCP. There's no such thing. And so I picked that out because Margaret Kimberly pointed that out in her talk. But I assumed you could hear that voice. It's not very good. I mean, it's good enough to understand what's being said, but I wouldn't call it very good. But there are services that are much better. And so I use something called 11 Labs. So this is a speech synthesizer that uses speech to create, actually that uses text to create speech. So now we're transitioning from speech to text to speech, the other direction that these things can go. And earlier I searched through here and they didn't have very many African American voices, but they did have one. And so I put that same little piece of text that we just heard automatically generated, and I put it in here.
Politicians and the media have much to say, none of it complimentary, about what they call the Chinese Communist Party or what they call the CCP.
So that was long and complicated, but this is what you can do. You can capture audio, you can convert it to text, you can clean that text up, and then you can put it in an app, I guess we would say, and then generate it back into speech. Now, that's, you don't really need to do that, but I just wanted to show you the cycle that's possible here. And with 11 Labs, there are different voices available. Here's an article about 11 Labs, comparing it to the other services available. I find it to be the best so far. Here's the Google.
Listen, I need to get something off my chest. I've been a loyal customer here for years, and I've never been this frustrated.
So they're demonstrating chatbots as customer service. That was the Google one, not too bad. Here's the Microsoft.
Listen, I need to get something off my chest. I've been a loyal customer here for years, and I've never been this frustrated.
Amazon has one.
I need to get something off my chest. I've been a loyal customer here for years, and I've never been this frustrated.
So these are different chatbots owned by the largest corporations in the world. So you have to figure these are some of the best chatbots available using text to speech. And so this is where things are going. So now I want to show you the Google Docs. So here's just a blank Google Doc. And under tools, they have voice typing. So voice typing is another term you'll hear about speech to text. But so in the Google world, they call it voice typing. I guess it's a little friendlier, but it's speech to text. So I click on this. I click on the microphone and it starts converting my voice to text. But there's no punctuation automatically applied. Period. New line. But if you know how it works, you can see that you can punctuate it yourself, comma, and just roll with that. And once you get the hang of it, it's not that difficult. Period. New paragraph. So the difference between Google and Microsoft is Microsoft offers automated punctuation, but neither are perfect. Everything you generate this way has to be copy edited. You'll see that Google is a little bit broken. It's been this way now for a couple of years, that it doesn't capitalize the first word after a period. It should do that automatically. But once you stop talking, it will point out that you lack capitals, and so with a few clicks you can fix it. But it works a lot better than it used to. I circle back every year or two and check it out, and so that's the only thing wrong now that I see is the lack of capitals, and that's been broken for a while. And that could be browsers, but I don't know. I try it in different browsers too. Let's see, I'm in Firefox here. No, I'm in Chrome here. So this should be the best version. So, but that's how these things work, as everybody knows. They change, they break, they disappear. You find a new one, you find a better one. And this is just the world that we live in. I wanted to also show you something that I made using 11 labs. Isn't this fun? So this is a minute and 14 seconds long. That's all I'm going to tell you about it, and we'll talk about it after it finishes.
Hi, I'm Jake Sloan. My book, Standing Tall, Willie Long versus the U.S. Government at Mare Island Naval Shipyard, has been published by Arcadia Press. In 1960, I was the youngest member of a group of African American workers who fought against racial discrimination in Vallejo, California. My book tells the story of how Willie Long organized the original 21ers to file a federal complaint about our job conditions. Some of the men had never had a raise. Our action led to federal investigations and improved opportunities for the more than 1,000 black workers in the yard. Our achievement changed working conditions at all U.S. military installations, influenced the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and laid a cornerstone for today's economic justice movements. Please read about these courageous men and how they risked everything to improve the future for their families and their communities in my book, Standing Tall, Willie Long versus the U.S. Government at Mare Island Naval Shipyard.
Took a audio recording of Jake, and I uploaded it to 11 Labs, this speech to text, text to speech application, and I created Jake's voice. And then I put the text in
Really?
that we wanted,
Wow.
and that generated Jake. And Marilyn, you know Jake very well. Didn't
Yeah.
that sound like Jake?
Yeah.
Jake had nothing to do with that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So this is where we are. And one of the reasons for doing it now, is we are now in the silly season, the election season. And I want everybody to be very critical to what they see and hear, because I'm not even going to get into deep fakes and videos and all that stuff. This is just about speech and text. We're keeping it simple, or keeping it bounded here today. But as you start seeing things, especially on Twitter, or some sketchier or whatever sites, make sure you take a real hard look at them before you share them, because there's going to be a lot of nonsense going on this year, and you can see how good things have gotten. And this is just the free stuff, basically. Well, I do pay for 11 Labs, but there's so much free stuff out there that there's going to be a lot of fakery or BS or whatever you want to call it going on. I also wanted to show this, which is silly but interesting. So this is just a website. So again, when I highlight this, up pops that little blue symbol.
An AI-generated, never-ending discussion between Werner Herzog and Slava Zizek.
So this is a chat bot. Well, actually two chat bots, I guess. And they just loaded text from Werner Herzog, the picture on the left. And then they loaded a bunch of text from Slavoj Zizek, the guy on the right. And they have them talking to each other. So this is completely machine generated. Neither one of these people had anything to do with this. It's just a couple of chat bots on a website.
So there is a violence that you expect. It's not in reality, then in your imagination. And this is what Lacan calls symptom ideal. His fundamental thesis is that the truth.
Yes, that's a good one.
So there is a violence that you expect.
Yes, that's a good one.
So anyway, this is amusing. It just goes on forever. The voices are okay, I guess. I don't think you'd mistake them for the actual people, but this is the kind of stuff that people are doing. So with that, I think we should now talk about speech to text and text to speech. Since we have a few people that have hung around, I think this would be a good time to do check-ins. It gives just a minute of what you came to hear and see, and what you liked, and what you want to talk about for the next hour, if you would, please.
I'll just jump in real quick. I think I was part of the inspiration for this when I was all excited that I learned, not that I'm going to use it a lot right away, but there were some things about this speech to text. I just happened upon it and I thought that was pretty exciting. And I told Mark about it. He said, so, and that kind of prompted this. But today I've learned, I mean, you've touched on some things that I kind of wanted. One thing I've been wanting to know how to do is to take, say, a YouTube video and turn that into a transcript. I've really been wanting, and I was so excited to see that you had showed a way to do that. And some of the other tools I thought were pretty exciting. It's going to take, I have to mull it over, but and that last one was fun to watch. Next person, Sarete.
Yeah, I know bits and pieces. Hi, Mark. It's nice to finally see you.
Yeah, it's good to meet you, Sarete.
Yeah, we see
been
each
too
other by
long.
email. But anyway, yeah, this whole AI thing, I've just gotten it in pieces, not like the way you've presented it. I've always gotten it in pieces. I use a tool here and there, but not really not understand, but not look at the big picture. Like you've eloquently put it step by step. The one thing that you mentioned, like you're talking about, this is the silly season. It's very, very true, very, very true. And this is what I've been telling my friends, especially those with young ones and all that, telling them that they need to have a keyword with their children as a security measure. Just because I call you and I sound like you doesn't necessarily mean I am you.
Hmm.
So if I ask you for a keyword, especially when you have children, ask them for the keyword. It's a known word between the two of them. If they don't have it, you know it's not them. Don't just listen to the sound. And that's my security piece that I keep sharing out to people. It's silly season, like you said. So, but I'm enjoying this. I'm enjoying this. I wanted to learn, in totality, like the way you've put it about this whole AI thing. And like I said, I used pieces of it, but not really get everything. So that's it.
Great, thanks. Yeah, we have a whole hour to talk about it, so we'll dive in it, however people want to.
Mhm.
I see Brian, your microphone's open.
Yeah, I have some trouble with my work. Yeah, I have to leave early, but I thought this was just a great presentation, Mark. I thought your slides were fabulous. I loved looking at the early versions of computers that you showed, and imagine having all that machinery in your house. I believe there is some use of this for providing therapy, where you feel like you're talking to a therapist, but it's not a therapist. You're talking to a machine. I haven't really investigated this, but I believe that has been done or is being done. And there's some research that shows that bibliotherapy, which is reading about psychological ways of building resilience and overcoming anxiety and depression. There's research that shows there's at least 21 studies that I have found, most of them randomized control group studies, that suggest that bibliotherapy is as effective as talking to an actual counselor for most cases of anxiety and depression. That's a shocking finding for somebody who spent his life training people to do face-to-face therapy. I did not expect to have that finding, and the reason I discovered that is because we had developed this disaster shock manual for helping people all around the world cope with stress. And I finally thought, well, I better have a look and see if bibliotherapy, what's the evidence for its effectiveness. So I was surprised to discover that. And it seems to me that people who want to know about how do I cope with this anxiety I'm having about something that's happened in my family or whatever, that using the text to speech and having what looks like a very human-looking avatar talk to you, it'd be interesting to evaluate the effectiveness of hearing that compared to just reading about it, because there may be for some people who are auditory learners that listening to it and seeing what looks like a person talking to you is helpful, and yet it's something reassuring about you're not actually having to unburden your soul to an actual person. So I found this there. It sort of got me thinking about some interesting applications. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And they're coming in one a day. I know the NIH is already pushing one. I mean, so they're, everything from, a little cheap app on your phone to the federal government are pushing these things. So, sorry you have to leave early, but let's talk tomorrow if you get home from the golf course in time.
I'm not going golfing today.
Oh, darn. Or tomorrow would be good.
But let's hear from some other folks here.
Yeah, Matt or Ava? Again, we're just, a quick check-in and see where you want to go with this, and then we have plenty of time to continue the conversation.
I had a couple questions. I have so many questions, but the two I wanted to start with, I was curious what you thought about the pace at which this stuff is developing. I mean, even just looking at something simple, like I like Midjourney for just generating AI images, and how rapidly that's advanced in the last year is astonishing. I mean, it's gone so fast. And I realize there's probably some sort of a ceiling that it's progressing toward, and maybe like the rate of acceleration won't seem to be quite as quick as we get there. But I was curious what you thought about that. And then I was also curious, I read a study the other day that really shocked me that was talking about, who's susceptible to kind of scams on the internet. And they tranched it generationally, right? So you had like the boomers, Gen X, millennials, Zoomers, right? Now, I correctly predicted that the boomers were pretty susceptible, but I incorrectly predicted that the Zoomers would not be. And those were probably the two demographics that were most susceptible to scams, which, surprised me because I would have thought Zoomers essentially grew up on the internet and they would see all this. But one of the hypotheses of the people who did the study was that Zoomers actually grew up on a very curated internet. And so they aren't used to anything kind of out of the norm because they've dealt with such good user experience and like all these very structured websites, unlike kind of the rough and tumble internet of like the 90s and the early 2000s. So I was curious who you thought might also be the prey to these scams as they start to emerge, deep fakes and things like that. Do you think younger people will be more vulnerable?
Yeah, I have the same concern. So we'll definitely talk about that. Let's get Ava in here for a minute before we launch into any long.
Hi, good morning. I don't have a lot to say. I'm babysitting my granddaughter. That's why I'm staying on mute because she loves to talk. But yeah, thank you so much for doing this. I'm just really curious in general about AI, and I feel like the more I learn, the less I know. So I'm just listening. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, and we're glad to have you. As I often say, lurking is learning.
Yes,
So,
yeah.
That's a statement we could all have above our computers. I spent a lot of time lurking in webinars. I got nothing to say. I just want to listen, and I might be cleaning house or washing dishes, but don't tell anybody.
Oh, good. So we're on the same. You get me.
Oh, absolutely. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's great. Well, so the first thing. Oh, there's a little one. The first thing to Matt especially. So I have just a few slides loaded about image creation. Would it be okay with everybody else if we just took 5 minutes and talked about that to address Matt's question? Because I thought this might come up. So
I think I heard it like on NPR yesterday. They were saying a similar thing to what Matt said. It was a new press release.
Yeah, it's a huge concern. It certainly is. Another thing I should say to Ava and to everyone is I gave 3 seminars last year on AI, and I collected them, and I have a Google Doc with I think 400 references now, and I put them all on a Google site. So as soon as I find that, I'll drop it in the chat. And so that's my AI resources that are shared, openly shared with everybody. And so I'll drop that in the chat. And I also gave an AI presentation at Story Center, the digital storytelling people in Berkeley that I also work with. And that's the short one. So if you just want the 30-minute version of AI, and that was the last one I did. So I sort of worked through it last year. There was a 2-hour session, and then I realized, well, I did two. I did a practice and theory, so I did two. So if you're really interested in AI theory, there's 2 hours on that. Then more the practical, there's 2 hours on that. And then there's the little 30-minute with some conversation afterwards, but the presentation is only 20 or 30 minutes on the Story Center. So all of that is on the Google site. So as soon as I find it, I'll drop it in the chat. So now I'm sharing my screen again. And early last year, I took a AI generated image workshop from a digital artist. And that's how I discovered Scribble Diffusion, actually. So I recommend everybody start with Scribble Diffusion. You can put the app on your phone and you take your finger and you draw something and you hit the button. And so I was thinking about Wiser already. So I scribbled that owl on the left and I hit the button. And that's what came up on the right. And look at the attitude of the bird, the way the head's turned, the feet on the lip. That's exactly what I drew. And again, it's this little free app you put on your phone. I took my finger, you can tell I'm not much of an artist, and made that and hit the button. No text involved, didn't say bird, didn't say owl, nothing. Just that scribble and hit the button. To me, that's just shocking. I'm just amazed that that little app does that. So you can see it's scribblediffusion.com. And then Matt commented on my image that I use. And so this is made with Vanna. I said Gamma. You get confused with all these apps. Vanna is the app where you upload 5 pictures of yourself. And then you throw these filters. So I wanted a picture, a professional. I don't own a tie. I've never owned a tie. So I need to, I didn't need, but I wanted a picture of me if I was like a lawyer or something. So I generated that, and you could see it pretty much looks like me. None of the pictures had the goatee. Goatee's new. So, and you have to work through it and generate a bunch of them. Some of them are terrible, but that's the one I kept. And then I hit the cyberpunk filter, which I particularly liked. And so there's the cyberpunk images on the right. And then a friend of mine did this, and then I saw that he cut it in half and he put 2 together. And I went, oh, I got to do that. So that's the image that Matt commented on earlier. So that's Vana.com. And then Midjourney is the best one that Matt referenced. And so I have another little project I'm doing. And so I said, imagine a brand new university from the future in the desert or something like that. I really need to save these prompts because a couple of years later you can't remember. And so what I wanted was that banner at the top for a Google site. So I have this project I'm working with some other educators on. And I didn't pick the name. I don't particularly care for it, but somebody else wanted that. So we use Ragnarok, which is some Norse mythology thing that kind of scares me. But anyway, so I created that with Midjourney and then edited in GIMP, the free and open source image editing software that I recommend to everybody. It's free, it works really well, and I've been using it for almost 20 years, and it always works. And it's constantly updated. So even though it's free and open source, it's one of the ones that works well. And it's, whatever that is, $400 a year cheaper than Apple. So I made the banner at the top for the website, but I cut that out of the image on the lower right. You can see that came directly out of the image on the lower right. But actually, the largest image is the smallest one here, the one on the left. When you use Midjourney, it creates these huge images, which means they have a lot of detail in them. So you can take a little piece. So you can see that I actually took just a little piece out of the center. And yet when I blow it up to the header size on the top, it's still pretty good. It gets, it's a little fuzzy, but it's not pixelated. It's just a little fuzzy. So, and that's Midjourney, and that's more than a year ago. So as Matt said, the thing continually improved. So these were also made with Midjourney, again, more than a year ago. So I haven't been playing with it lately. I don't have any contemporary ones, but I have fooled with it and it is improving, that's for sure. So the one on the left was the image I used for my AI presentations. And if you look in the center behind the window, inside there's a library. So I made this to represent the black box that is AI or large language models. So inside of a server room, there's this sort of spaceship or whatever it is. And again, I didn't, the prompts were very random. I was really playing with it. And so I just put in some designers that I liked, and it came out like this. I had no intention of creating this, believe me. I was just playing around. But here it is, and I really like it.
I didn't realize I've seen this. You shared this one before. I didn't realize those were, it was a books in the middle inside, and I think it might be effective to somehow just blow it up and show it a little closer to see that part. But anyway,
it's in there.
That's
so
clever.
and it's inside of a server farm, which is kind of represented in the background. But
That's
anyway,
clever.
I just like the image. But it's this idea of a corporate capture of public information and then selling it back to us. That's what I was trying to get at.
Mhm.
That's where we are. And then the little image on the right. So again, this is Midjourney, and I find that when you use these image generators, they tend to have kind of a general style. And it kind of gets boring or repetitious, but Midjourney, you can really push it to change style. So the reason I put these images together is because they are so different. The one on the right, I was talking with a friend of mine in Arkansas. Actually, we were text chatting, and he's Arkansas Razorback fan, and we were talking about baseball, so it was a year ago. And while we were texting, I was playing with Midjourney, and my friend's nickname is Scooter, and the mascot of the Razorbacks is a hog. And so I was just playing with Midjourney while we were talking, and it was one of those kind of lazy text things where minutes went between replies. And so I generated Scooter on a scooter going to a Hogs game. And the only thing was Midjourney could not make a baseball cap. I don't understand how Midjourney is an American corporation. It made beanies with little propellers on the top. It made all kinds of weird things, but it could not just make a red baseball cap on top of this. It couldn't do it. And so finally I said, well, hell with it. I went to Amazon. I pulled up a Arkansas Razorback batting helmet. I stole it from Amazon and I stuck it on the head there. And so just like with the text, you can get close, but then you kind of have to go in and edit again. So I put the Razorback on the scooter into GIMP and dropped the actual picture of a helmet onto it. You had to do a little editing, but we got there. And then I spent an inordinate amount of time, and this is going on too long. I didn't mean to go on this long with images. I spent an inordinate amount of time trying to generate a full moon on a bay, a tropical island with the moon reflecting off the bay. I tried different apps, Midjourney. I think I finally did this in Midjourney. It just, I don't know. I couldn't get it to work. It kept putting the island out in the bay. I wanted this point of view. And so finally I got like 3/4 of the way, and then I just kind of had to manually edit it. And then when I was done, I put my favorite lethal autonomous weapon, which is the technical term for what they call robot dogs, to sell them to us. So that's a robot dog with a fully automatic weapon. And just the other day, I saw one of these with a flamethrower. And so I'm sure these are on the battlefield in different places around the world. But anyway, so I just throw that in there to guard my digital paradise. And that's all I wanted to share. Sorry for going on so long. But yeah, so the same technology generates images and now videos. So
Matt had asked a question. Did you remember that? Or are you going to get to that?
yeah, but you'll have to remind me because I'm old. I remembered the image part.
Well,
Remind me of
what
the first part, Matt.
I thought Matt, you speak for yourself. I thought I heard you wondering who was susceptible to the silly
Oh,
season.
right.
To talk about that. Matt, go ahead to say
Yeah,
something.
not even so much the silly season, but just these deep fakes with AI images for one, simulated voices. I mean, I know personally, I've been trying to kind of sharpen my own detection here. So I've been looking at a lot of like AI versus real pictures to try to tell the difference. I think I've gotten pretty good with the pictures, but the voices are too good. You know, like some of like just what you did, like with the voice earlier. You know, it sounded just like it. Right.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are little tells maybe, but I can't pick them up. But with images, I still can. But I guess my big question was, what groups do you think are going to be the most victimized by this?
Well, I think so. You're asking my opinion here. So this is strictly an opinion. I think the most susceptible will be the most ideological. So whether you're left or right, I think that the people that are more in that bubble or echo chamber, whatever you want to call it, I think that they're going to want to believe these fakes and will just uncritically promote them, and then of course they'll spread that way. So I don't think age is a factor. I mean, well, it is a factor, but I don't think it's the determinant one. I think it's more ideology. But that's my point of view.
That makes a ton of sense because that dovetails with the whole history of lies, right? I mean, everybody has always wanted to. If you want to believe propaganda, it's easy to do it. So
Yeah, confirmation bias.
Yeah.
There's plenty of, this can be looked into more closely, and I think I can back up, my intuition, if you want to call it that, that the ideology will be more powerful than the class or age. But of course, class and age will factor in there. I'm not surprised that the younger people were more susceptible because nobody's teaching critical digital literacy. Nobody is an overly broad statement, but I find that the people that I work with have not consciously taken courses or thought about their own digital literacy. I mostly work with older people, but I do talk with younger people. And while they're very good at using phones to communicate and to, create memes, and, so they're very good at that. But again, no critical digital literacy training, So it seems to me that despite the fact that Chrome pads have been in elementary schools for 20 years now, I'm just not seeing that they're getting the critical thinking part.
So the first thing you said was ideology. What do you mean? People with certain ideology may be more impressionable? Or what did I miss?
They want to believe.
That want
so they're going to jump to, hey, I love that, and they're just going to share it without thinking about it. And that's going to be true left, right, up, down. I'm not picking on any one. I'm just saying the more ideologically driven you are, the more that you use your confirmation bias to promote your ideology, the more you're going to just believe these things at face value. And then there's that same thing when you push back against people that believe in ideology, they tend to dig in rather than switching to a critical approach. So anyway, so that's why I think that, but we'll see, but it's definitely the silly season.
Hey, Mark, I just wanted to ask you a question from your experience. It seems more like the way you describe a prompt it's more important. I mean, the lingo that you have to use, the gymnastics, I'm sure you've seen these prompts that are a page long to be very, very specific. So that's a skill that will be needed to be able to, in moving now and in the future, the more description, the more you'll get out of it. Just like you're talking about your moon, trying to move it, trying to make it,
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much branding going on. So the media and the corporations have grabbed onto this prompt engineering. And I don't know if you've seen, for years, you can make $200,000 a year as a prompt engineer. I have no idea what that sentence meant, but I just said it. I call it prompt crafting, or I think prompt writing, would be simple enough. And what I find interesting is now you're getting into who's training whom. Are we training it or is it training us? And I think both are true. And I think you have to be very conscious of that. One of my concerns, I guess I'll say, is that since these are statistical generators, as I explained earlier, that there's going to be a flattening or a mediocritizing or a regression to the mean, however you want to think about it. I think both of the language and the culture. And I believe that's going to happen. I mean, I don't see any way around it. It seems to me that now there's going to be little bubbles of people who can afford not to interact with AI. Because as you see, it's everywhere now. I mean, every day I get an email from some service that I use or some app I own or, whatever. Every day it's like, now with AI. The other day I watch golf once in a while. In fact, that's what I'm going to do after this because there's a big championship series going on today. Now, golf clubs with AI. I mean, so it's just,
Trendy.
branding, advertising, propaganda, call it whatever you want.
Yeah.
But it's gone to the silly. I was watching YouTube and I saw a guy come up and say, you can invest in energy generated by AI. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
So
yeah. A follow-up question to that is, as you get better, so the English people are going to be much advantaged in the way you talk and speak and the way you type stuff. As we get better, you talk about the text to speech, and then there's the other imaging, text to image, I guess. So are those the same crafting skills you need? Or like imaging, you need to know what a perspective is, basics. And then you need to know, like a cinema view or something. So that means you need to have some more deeper understanding of what it entails to have an image, right?
Well, so I agree that we need to be visually literate as well as other literacies. But in using Midjourney or some of the image generators, I haven't fooled with the video ones yet, but I have friends, that show me things they made. Most of that stuff is built in. And so the operator doesn't need to know those things.
Okay.
But the consumer needs to know those things to be critical about the image, right? So these are linked. Your two questions to me are linked. That it's up to us humans to develop our critical thinking about audio, voices, about images, about text, about video, and that's a lot. I mean, most people go to work, come home, feed their kids. When are they going to learn these different literacies? And they are different. But in order to participate in this crazy culture, to me, it's necessary. I don't have kids. I'm old. I have the time to spend, but most people don't. And so that's a big concern. And you're right with I have like a global personal learning network is the term. And so the talk everywhere outside of the West is these things are racist and biased, and they are. And yet, just criticizing them isn't enough because they're everywhere. And I have to say, there is a flip side to that is non-native English speakers, their writing and videos and things are improved by using these. So if English is your third or fourth language, you can generate the same quality of text that I generate with enough practice learning how to prompt it. And so to students especially, this is actually good for them if English is not their first language. But at the same time, it is, racist is a little extreme. It is focused on the West. It was built by the West. It's owned by the West. It's Western. So I have a friend who's a teacher in Egypt, and so she's constantly testing it. She's Muslim. English is not her first language, but she's very well educated. Her English is perfect because, Egypt, was colonized.
Yeah.
So it's not, so she doesn't struggle with the language at all. She has a PhD. So, but she's constantly testing it and showing how it comes up short because it doesn't understand the culture at all. And so the only thing is what's the solution? Well, the solution is for Muslim cultures to build their own chatbots.
Yeah. Language models, more to say? Or
Yeah. Well, all of it, so it starts, she has her degree is actually computer science, although she doesn't teach computer science. She teaches digital literacy and things like that. And design. She's a course designer. But her degree is in computer science. So one of the issues is resources. These things are expensive. So another reason that they're focused on the West is only corporations like Microsoft and Google can afford to build these things
and monetize them.
Well, they have to monetize them because, it's an investment. So yeah, they're using capitalism to create them, but they're also using the Western culture.
Yes.
And so I read one small study. I mean, this is, early days on all this, in a way, in the mass use of it. Despite what I said about it, it's been around a long time, but the mass use of it is still pretty early. I read a study that said that no university could afford to create a large language model. And when they said no university, they meant Harvard with its whatever it is, 100 billion or $400 billion endowment, whatever it is. It's huge. I can't remember, but it's a huge number. But the study pointed out that Harvard or, a university like that could not afford to build their own large language model from scratch. They have the technical ability, but just the financial resources necessary. And so if they can't afford to do it, how many countries could afford to do it? But so I think what's going to happen is more consortiums. So there's just going to have to be an African large language, right? So they will have to work together, pool the resources, draw from multiple cultures, because the West is drawing from multiple cultures. I mean, they kind of look the same, but if you get right down to it, there are differences, and so, so a West Asian one.
Is English is a first language for you, Surete?
I was no.
No.
In strict sense, no. No.
Second language, but
It's
you
a
grew up
second
with
language.
you grew up using it in school.
Yes, they push English. I'm from Kenya, for those who don't, so you grow up with your tribe language. That's your first introduction. That I'm Luya. And then as you get to school, going age, you learn Swahili and English at the same time.
Yeah.
So you're carrying three languages at the same time. So sometimes there's a conflict in your head until sometimes somewhere something overtakes the other. So
did your parents speak English?
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say
very British and very,
yeah. So although, you're always going to claim your tribal language as your first language,
that is
really you learned all of them at the same time, right?
Pretty much. Yep.
Yeah. You spoke English when you were 3 years old.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what I'm hearing. So
okay.
yeah. But it gets complicated.
Yes.
Right. But so we know that Russia and China will be building their own large language models. I mean, I just assume that if they haven't already.
I'm sure they have.
Yeah, I'm sure they have too, but we're in such this weird political situation that we wouldn't know. But then it's going to take consortiums of other, so what is it? It would be East or Southeast Russia would have to build their own to cover all the stands, right? Which is half of Russia or more than half of Russia. And then North China would have to be the same thing, right? The non-dominant culture. And so I think that's what's going to happen is consortiums.
I wanted to ask Rete because, every little tribe probably will not have one, but would they do one for Swahili? I'm just trying to imagine, like you said, all the stands. Well, will there be sub languages? Or in China, there's Mandarin and was it Pinyin or something?
Cantonese and
Yeah, there's 8 or 10 languages in China. Yeah.
Would you
And
say
I'm going to
Rete?
guess that no, I think it's just going to be the dominant ones.
Well, I
But
think there's a
Swahili is spoken across several countries, correct?
yes, yes. Swahili is spoken. It's like the largest language within Africa, by the way. It's
Oh, in the whole
spoken
on the whole
all the way
continent.
east going to south.
Yeah.
A little bit more, but the penetration is now slightly different. Other nations are different. But to also question what you're saying, not question, but to comment on what you are saying about the plateauing. The biggest issue that I want to say Africa and certain places have is that a lot of the stuff that they have is not digitized. So the West has digitized, so it was easy for it to learn a language model very quickly. So yeah, and you understand the bias because they're already using stuff that is available.
Yeah.
Now it's like you said, other countries need to come back and say, let's digitize everything that we have so that we can teach it. The whole, upload it, however they do it, as to a language model and understand it in different ways.
Yeah, and that's a huge issue that you're pointing out there, because what tools will they use to digitize their culture? It'd be Western tools, right?
Yes.
And so the bias is built into the translate,
Yep.
right? So yeah, this is a huge issue,
Mhm.
and I'm hoping that some other cultures can successfully do this. But yeah, the smaller cultures are going to get left behind on this. They're going to have to pick a dominant culture model, but it doesn't have to be English. Eventually, there'll be multiple models at least,
Mhm.
right? So an African culture hopefully could pick like a Swahili model, so it'd be like the universal language kind of.
Yeah.
I think that's how it's going to shake out. Because of the cost of these things, there's not going to be 193 different model or how many
Yeah.
language groups are there? 2,000, 3,000 language
Mhm.
groups. They're not going to be that many. But there could be these, multicultural ones.
Exactly.
There used to be, I haven't heard much talked about lately, but there used to be a discussion about how television flattened out American dialects. I'm old enough that I remember when people on TV spoke in many different dialects. Well, American dialects. But now when you watch a TV show, they all speak the same standard English dialect. And
Very
there was a
true.
lot of research around that. It focused on the news speakers. And so Walter Cronkite, again, back in the 50s and the 60s, when TV really became widespread, it took a while. Things didn't happen as fast back in the old days. The adoption of TV took probably a couple decades, where now the adoption of the smartphone took, 5 years or something. But there was complaints back in the 50s and the 60s that since all the news people spoke kind of in a Midwestern accent, your basic, sort of Kansas City, Indianapolis kind of accent,
Mhm.
that changed American culture. That combination of that plus the TV spreading it all across the country changed the American accent. And it's kind of true. You don't hear, many different American dialects on a TV show. You basically, you have your just to be overly simple. You got
Mhm.
your white culture, you got your black culture, you got your Southern culture, you got your Northern culture. So you kind of get those small differences, but you certainly don't get, like it used to be. I'm old enough, I can hear the difference between somebody from Georgia and somebody from Louisiana and somebody from Texas. I mean, those are distinct accents to me, but you don't see that in TV shows. I don't watch that much TV, but I don't. the stuff I watch, everybody speaks sort of
Got the
standard.
Fargo accent with my relatives in South Dakota all talk like Fargo,
Yeah,
Fargo.
like Fargo.
They
Yeah.
all, yeah, sure, you betcha. Real good then.
Yeah.
They do.
Yeah, I mean, they're
Yeah.
used as stereotypes now, but they're not
But
dialects,
those
like they used to be.
that's the way they talk.
Yeah.
They used to.
They used to, but it's all flattening out. And I think the
Maybe
same thing's
flattening.
going to happen. Yeah.
Mm.
But my concern is the mediocritizing, or whatever that word would be. That the margins will get, just like we're talking with smaller cultures are going to get left out.
Mhm.
Non-dominant points of view
Mhm.
are going to get left out. And I really think that that's going to happen. I think it's intentional. I believe that's what's going to happen. I finally
And
got
the
the link
plateauing.
to the AI site, so I put that in the chat. Anybody wants to look at AI resources? Sorry.
And a plateauing of information, the creativity. I feel like human creativity is going to go down because we're relying on something that actually learned from the previous people, well, us. And so there's only so much information. There's no broadening, like, oh, let me just do something that is not even thinkable. The system will not, if you rely too much on AI, I feel, I don't know, just an opinion, that we will not be able to be creative. We'll dumb down our creativity, whether it's in languages, in arts, and whatever.
I totally agree.
We talked about that in some of these discussions, and as I recall that it's limited by what the content is. And at Wiser, you're encouraged to go out and do action research and and get beyond that, and then you can put things into the internet from your research. You can publish, and then it will be there. But you have to go out and get that information and synthesize it, I guess, and create it.
Yeah, these chatbots. Well, that's a generic term, so let's use that one. These chatbots are representing the culture they were trained on. So there's nothing new. They're just, again, back to the stochastic parrot. They're slightly altering the way they're presenting it, but they're not there's no learning going on in the machine. It's just using the same stuff to create slightly novel, but all previously known things. Yeah. And so I think there will be a premium placed on actual creativity. And as I started to say earlier, I think there are going to be these bubbles where people are going to deliberately avoid. So let's pick on Harvard. I'm going to bet that Harvard kind of deliberately avoids AI and all of these things and sticks with the old-fashioned model and teaches people how to think and be creative because they can afford to. Where those of us out here in the real world, we're going to be inundated with this AI stuff. I mean, I think it was just today I clicked on one of my Google apps. It's like, oh, look, Gemini is now in this app. Great. So I think it's going to be everywhere. And again, people,
What's Gemini?
Google's large language model. Last year was called Bard. This year it's called Gemini.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. Google's hard to keep up with. They're constantly changing. But yeah. And so I think there's going to be this flattening because the stuff's everywhere. And then back to Kate Crawford, the Microsoft scientist and the real critic of AI, one of the main critics of AI. The people that own the models are the same people that are deciding what's misinformation or what's not allowed. And so I don't know how much anybody here has actually generated text using large language models, but more and more often. Now, a year ago, it happened, I think, once. This month, it's happened 3 different times where the service I pay for said, I'm not comfortable talking about that. And they were very innocuous things. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I wasn't trying to build a device or, any of these things that, they're supposed to protect against. And then if you go to Reddit or some of the sketchier, more fun places on the web, they'll tell you how to get around that. You say, well, my grandma needs this thing, and it'll tell you how to build something that it shouldn't tell you how to build. I'm trying to be careful here. So
true.
it's not that I'm trying to do that kind of stuff, but it just comes up and says I'm not comfortable talking about that, and it won't talk about it. So, and that's the corporation that owns it, putting what they call guardrails. But what they call guardrails, I call censorship. And so, but their position is we're the corporation, we own it, we can do what we want. Well, there you go. So there's a lot of discussion. You know, I spend most of my time with educators, higher education, but in the open model, the open education resources and open education pedagogy. I'm hoping Wiser will move in that direction, but you know, that's a different discussion for another day. Now I lost my train of thought. Oh, so amongst those people, the open education people, they're talking about open large language models, open source and openly, and they talk about auditing them, but I already touched on that earlier. I don't think that's possible.
But what
All
does
you can
open
do
mean?
is, pardon?
What does open mean in this context?
Well, as opposed to closed, which you know, most higher education, you have to pay to get into it, to register, to be allowed to access it. So that's closed.
Okay.
And then open, like open education resources are freely available
Okay.
textbooks, and that's expanded. Now you can go online and get syllabi, you can get entire courses for free. So that's the open part.
Thanks.
Yeah.
People
I
have
kind of knew that, but I was fuzzy.
Yeah.
people have to go there and make sure that it's actually citing the right things, right?
Right.
So there's a
so
maintenance
it's
cost
a little
to it.
more difficult. It's a little
Yes.
less trustworthy.
Yes.
Although personally, I don't trust Pearson that much. But when Pearson is presented, Brightspace, you know, D2L, the learning management system that many colleges still use, that's a closed system in more ways than one, because they're making you buy Pearson published textbooks and use the Pearson learning management system. And so that's a very closed system, you know, so there are levels of being closed and open. But there is a movement around the world, and UNESCO is doing great work actually on open education. So opening things up, and it's been going on for 20 or 30 years. I mean, you know, the MIT has all the different engineering and science courses that you can take for free. And Google now has a lot of computer engineering and systems engineering, all the IT, a lot of those courses for free, although you have to pay to get the certificate. So, you know, that you can take the course, but if you want the certificate, you have to pay because somebody has to assess you. And so this is a very interesting development in education. So I started to say, I say all that because the open model is again you're less sure, and so when you want to use these open resources, you have to have good critical skills, right? You have to look at, you have to check every reference. You know, when you get it from Pearson, even though you shouldn't believe it, you believe it, right? Because well, you know, it's been peer reviewed, and you know, so it's believable. But when you get into these open education models, yeah, you have to vet everything yourself. And so that's one reason it's been very slow to adopt. And also,
What's an
you're
example?
getting residuals.
It's an example of a course you've taken from something like Pearson or what another one, either of you, any of you. Do you have an example of a course you've taken?
I've taken some course in Coursera.
What's that? Coursera?
Coursera is a website for
Oh.
they curate all these universities, institutions, and you pick some certificate in there and just learn there. So you have to pay for it.
Yeah.
So it's
an aggregator.
Yes.
It pulls from MIT and other big institutions, and then also you know,
Some companies do.
individuals, some companies. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
And it aggregates them.
Yep.
And then you could now, so, 3 years ago, whatever it was, you
Mhm.
paid per course. Now they have a subscription service. So you pay
Yeah.
about a month and you can,
So,
access courses. So all of this is evolving.
yeah.
But
And I'm
I've
trusting that
taken,
it's worth it. So
Like,
well,
what
it puts it on you.
did you learn? Did you find it useful?
yeah, it was more like the virtual classroom,
Mhm.
basically.
That's
Yeah.
what they are. They're just online courses. So
Yeah. It's online course. Yeah.
Well,
some are good, some are not.
Yeah.
I took one with our accrediting agency. Won't say their name here, but a couple. I've taken a few, and it does have that talk. You click, and it will read the text to you, but it's not a very interesting voice. I've learned, I did learn once. I worked with someone just at an office, and the person who was a temp for a while told me about voiceovers. And so I learned a little on that. And it's like, well, you bring your voice up and you bring your voice down, and it makes it more interesting for the people who are listening to you. And it does. And so I noticed that in newscasters and things. And I noticed, so I used that. I did a message for an organization or two, an outgoing message on their voicemail. And so I learned that little bit along the way, but
Great.
but the that course, but I didn't, I took to learn about my job. I don't know, it was very technical, and I missed having live people to interact with. I mean, I could blog and ask questions, but it was so high technical, and it was just like inserting knowledge, and I just didn't like it that well.
Mhm.
I don't know if I learned as well.
Mhm.
Because like if I got stuck on something, I would just glaze over and go to the next thing, and then I don't know. But I
Well,
think they could be useful. Yeah.
just like the large language models are training us
Mm-hmm.
as we train them,
Mm-hmm.
online learning has to have a built-in component of training you how to use it.
Yeah.
So anytime you take an online class and you're not familiar with how the thing works, yeah, it's going to be weird, because there are no people there, and there never will be. So it's a
Yeah.
completely different thing.
I mean, supposedly there's this blog there, and I can ask a question. And what piggyback on what you said, well, maybe I can train them. And I guess I have to be proactive a little bit, thinking that way too.
The way I look at it is, it's like we've tasted a different way of learning and throughout, and that's what we were conditioned to learn. And then now here's a new model that is conflicting with exactly what we've learned all these years.
Mm.
And so we're having that issue. But the young people, they're just like, oh, this is all we know. I'm going to the computer and there's a teacher. Oh, okay, this is how the exam is done. They don't have I want to call it a hangover of the previous,
Mm.
There's no unlearning necessary.
Yes,
It's one way to
exactly.
put it.
Unlearning is a better word.
Yeah, that's how I like to think about it.
I think
Also, we're at the beginning of distance education online. Now distance education, I've done these seminars for years now. One of them was about early alternative education, and in the Yukon in Canada, more than 100 years ago, a little plane would drop a crate on a village full of books and paper and pencils, and then they would read their book and write their assignment and get on the shortwave radio and talk to the teacher. So, I mean, this is education that has been going on a long time, but this online thing using all these new tools is pretty new. And the last decade, and certainly the last 4 years, of course, where everybody had to move online, they were trying to do what they were doing before. Is the basic thing. It's like, okay, I'm a teacher. This is what I do. You give me Zoom or you give me Canvas or one of the learning platforms. And so I'm just going to do what I do and just put it in there. And that doesn't work that well.
I guess I guess for me, I really want to keep going the conversation like we're having, and yeah, we're having some discussion behind the scenes at Wiser about what we're doing with our seminars. And one voice says it's for discussion, it's for interaction. So is it for that or is it for content? You know, and I think what's something I've myself have researched is folk and popular education models where people it's important to build relationships and learn to talk to actual people. So I keep that in mind as I go along, although I find all these tools really nifty.
Yeah, I often bring up the SAMR model, SAMR, a person that I've learned from and met online. I have no idea where he lives, actually. I think on the west coast of the U.S. I'm not really sure. And he's not from the U.S. and I couldn't tell you where. South America, someplace. So this is how it is with online people. So, but he, I don't know, 20 years ago, hard to say. Doesn't say right here. The SAMR model is substitution. So you get this new tool and you just take what you had and you stick it in the new tool, and that's a digital course. It can be a digital course. But then the next is augmentation. So you take your course content. If we just talk about an online class, you take your course content, you stick it in the tool, whatever it is, Coursera, Brightspace, Google Classroom, doesn't matter. You stick it in there. But then you add the videos, or you add links to the readings, or you put a chat room in there for people to talk to each other. So now you've augmented what you were doing. So before you stood in front of class, you talked to them and they left and they did whatever they did. And they brought it back and you looked at it. Now you've augmented it by adding the videos or the whatever, games, or, there's all these different things. And that's kind of where we are now. We're kind of to that, in general across higher ed. But then there's modification where then you say, well, these tools are so powerful. So my favorite is hybrid learning, where now in a class, you can have a conversation, you can have a synchronous class, so once a week you can have an hour-long class, but now everything's online, so you can tell the students, you have to do the readings, write your assignment, watch the videos, whatever it is, you have to do all that before you come to class. So now I'm not providing the content, you've already ingested the content. Now when you come to class, now we have a conversation. Now, that's a whole different way to approach teaching. And you couldn't do that, especially in a class of 300 people, at Cal or whatever. But now in these smaller online classes, you can do that. So that now you're actually modifying what you're doing. You're really changing what you're doing. The content's still the same, but the way it's ingested, the conversation becomes more important, like you like, Marilyn. And so that's where we're trying to get Wiser, to get to that place. And then redefinition. This is, a couple generations from now, online courses are going to look very different. I have no idea what they're going to look like, but they're going to be very different. I'm sure of that. And so that's this model, SAMR model from Ruben Puente Udora, that some people use. And it's just a natural thing. So 4 years ago, everybody just took their courses, just stuck it in something and said, okay, you get the same credit for that you got coming to my class. And that didn't work out so well, which is why a lot of people are racing back to the classroom, but it's just not going to work. So.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, Mark. I appreciate that. I'll put that on my notes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's we live in interesting times, as the Chinese say. But there's a lot of potential. So.
Matt, you want to chime in? Are you still there? What are you thinking about? Anything? Or Ava, you got any comments?
I'm still here, but no immediate thoughts.
Yeah. What are you working on these days, Matt?
In what way?
What are you working on?
Oh, in what sense?
Any projects for Wiser?
Oh, for Wiser. No, I'm just getting through all the courses.
Mm-hmm.
So.
You were doing some translating for a while?
Yeah, I'm still doing that too. Yeah. I'm working on these Spanish personality theory books.
Cool.
But they're like They're very long, so it's like a slow process.
You got to translate the whole thing.
Yeah, this is where I would really love like machine translation to be there, but it's just like not even close. Just to kind of
Yeah, it's not even close.
talking about it's like it's awful.
Oh.
So yeah,
But once you get them translated, if you can find a good model, you'll be able to summarize them and be able to compress it. One thing that large language models are good at is summaries. But you have to tell it, don't change the text, right? So again, you have to tell it, I'm not trying to generate something new from this text. I just want you to take this text, keep the words, and then and then you can say, give me a 300-word summary or give me a 500-word summary. And it's good at that. Yeah. So, I mean, there's some things that they're very good at, and there's a lot of things
I
they're
haven't
not
heard
very
about
good at.
that tool. That's interesting.
Well, it's any tool. It's just that approach where you just say, keep the words. Don't add. We have to tell it. Don't add any words. Use these words to generate the summary, so that it's not adding stochasticity. It's not adding randomness. It's just compressing it down, and it has the tools to write sentences and write paragraphs, and so it can do it.
Right.
So that's a very good use. I like to take it, and so as I said before, you have a conversation with it. And so I start with something, an article or something, and say, tell me more about this. Or actually, usually I start with the term. I've learned something new, and I go to the chatbot and I say, explain the origin and history of this thing I just learned about. And so it'll give you a standard. It's always a standard view, right? A middle of the road view because of the way it's trained. And then you can feed it the article that inspired that and say, so summarize this article, and it will do that. And you can say, well, what other researchers or theorists work in this field or around this topic? And it'll list people for you with little summaries. And then you can pick 2 or 3 and say, well, what would they think about that article? And then, okay, so write an essay taking the article I started with and the criticism or responses from these people, and write me an essay. And so I kind of do it like a bricklayer, right? I kind of build the thing, and you can end up with some fairly complex documents, that way, because it's a dialogue. And then, of course, you have to vet every single thing that it says. So the longer document that you build, the longer it takes. So you can build a document fairly quickly, but then it takes a long time to vet it all and make sure that it makes sense. This is another point that it's good to bring up when you're talking about using chatbots or whatever, is you kind of have to be an expert already in what you're generating, because you have to be able to vet it. So using a chatbot to generate a bunch of text that you really don't know anything about is not a good use of them, because you don't know if it's BS or not, right? So that's another way to look at it, is chatbots are really good for generating text that you already know about, because it spits out text really fast.
Yeah.
And so it's good for that. It's good for spitting out text and in the voice of an author. There's different things you can do with it and generate quite a bit of text quickly. If you know the subject matter, you can look at it and decide if you like it, and then you can go in and edit it if there's some mistakes or whatever, or things you want to add. So it's good for that. But if you just say, explain nuclear fusion to me, well, how am I going to know what it tells me, right? So that's the thing. So you don't want to be using them to just generate random stuff, because you don't, it would take as long to, it would take like a whole physics course. It would take that long to learn enough to be able to tell if what the chatbot said was true. So you might as well just take the physics course and just, skip the chat thing.
Hey, Sarete put something in the chat. What was that about, Sarete? When you unmute.
Oh, it was just I try to keep up with things that might be important, things like translating, where like Mark said, you have to know what it's going to tell you first. You can't always assume what it's telling you is the right thing. So Vapi.ai, and there's another one. There's a bunch of them.
Yeah, there's a new
And
one every day.
and like Mark also mentioned that sometimes you have to chain all these things together to actually get the result. There's no one box solution. You have to chain how to translate from an audio book, maybe the same book that you're trying to translate, Matt, you change it into an audio, a transcription of it. Then you do the transcription to tell it to translate it using another system, maybe OpenAI or whatever. So once you've translated it and you tell it, this is English, this is Spanish, I'm trying to move it to English, and then it does the whole translation. So it's a chain sometimes. So
Yeah,
this
and
is
that's
just
where
one
we're
of the
moving.
chains, by the way.
Yeah, that's where we're moving, is chaining these things together now. Now that we have so many of them,
Yeah.
so you can think of it as a stack or
Yeah.
a chain, right? And the
Yeah.
people that use APIs, they think of it as chaining them together, right? And you can put
Yes.
them together.
Yes.
And then you can now, using some of these coding platforms, right? You can use JSON or Python to link 6 apps together, right? And you drop something in one end and out the other
Done.
end comes what you want, right? So
Yeah.
this is it's a brave new
So
world.
yeah. So this might apply, might not apply. I just threw it in there. So not gonna be this full solution, I can tell you.
Yeah, it sounds like this is similar to 11 Labs, but again, there's so many of them.
Same.
Yeah. And so hopefully, if you're interested in this kind of thing, you have the sort of journalist websites that you trust, ZNet, I can't think off the top of my head, Tech Report, no, Tech something that starts with R. So there's several of these websites, and you start seeing their stuff over and over. TechCrunch, there's one of them, yeah. And so then you can start looking for best ofs, right? But if you just look for best of and it's some random site you never heard of, who knows if what they're telling you is any good. But some of these sites, you run into them over the years, you keep running into them, and you're like, well, that site's been pretty good. And so again, this goes back to critical literacy. But then you can search these best ofs and get a list. Like I searched for apps like 11 Labs. And so I went and one of them I recognized, and it listed like 10 apps like 11 Labs, and I don't remember the other 9. So maybe it was probably on there. I don't know. But yeah, and that's so every 6 months or every year now. I mean, probably every 6 months now, you need to do that and say, well, I've been using this one. What other ones are available that are like it? And can I test them? And are they better? Yeah, because like Claude and Midjourney, I've been using those for over a year. They were the best a year ago. I have no idea today.
Yeah. And there's also Bing, which is basically a OpenAI, but
yeah, it's OpenAI. Yeah.
Bing, I use Gemini a lot. Perplexity is another one. The list goes on.
Yeah, I have a huge list. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
The one to mention, and we are coming up on the top of the hour. So before I thank everybody, have you run into Poe.com? POE, like Edgar Allan Poe.
I believe so.
It's an aggregator. So like Coursera aggregates all those different courses. Poe aggregates all the large language models.
Oh.
And so I just saw that for $20 a month, you can get access to ChatGPT 4 or whatever the current one is, and Claude AI 3 Opus, which is the paid version.
Wow.
And all these the top level ones. And also on Poe, you can create your own, like Hugging Face. You can create your own chat bot and then put it on the website so that people can use it. And so we've already, in a year, we've moved from all these different individual ones to now an aggregator. I pay $20 a month for Claude, so I think I'm going to drop Claude and subscribe to Poe, because then I can compare Claude to ChatGPT 4, which, although because I do have a Microsoft subscription because I work with Jake, and so I can use ChatGPT 4, but the free version 3.5 is really quite different. It's really less good.
Yeah. And there are websites, I'm sure you've come across it, Mark. There are websites that list all these things for different tasks.
Yeah.
So that would be a good information for the other people.
Yeah. And there's whole sites now, course builders. So a year ago, I just took some text and dropped it in and built a whole course, one click of the button.
Mm.
So these things are out there. I mean, yeah, it's amazing. So
Yeah.
we live in interesting times. So coming up to the top of the hour, I want to thank everybody for hanging out and chatting. This is a really good conversation today.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate it.
Mhm.
I don't know what the next one I'll do, but I look forward to everybody joining us.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to thank you all.